Sit there.
Welcome everybody. My name is Robin. I'm a librarian here at the Detroit Public Library. It is with great pleasure that we welcome today's guest speaker, an intrepid explorer whose journeys embody the essence of adventure and resilience. Please join me in welcoming George Balarezo, the author of the gripping travel memoir, Unhinged in Ethiopia, 2,000 Kilometers of Hell and Heaven on a Bicycle. His solo unsupported cycling expedition across Ethiopia in 2019 forms the backbone of his latest book. Over 2,000 kilometers, George encountered not just the physical landscapes of Ethiopia, from its ancient rock-hewn churches to its breathtaking vistas, but also navigated through the eternal landscapes of human endurance and spirit. His journey is a testament to the trials and triumphs that come with pushing one's limits. Today, George will share with us his experiences from this journey, offering insights into the rich tapestry of Ethiopian culture, the challenges of extreme travel, and the personal growth that comes from such an adventure. George is not only a cyclist and an author, but also a university lecturer, splitting his time between Seoul, South Korea, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. His adventurous spirit has led him on solo cycling expeditions across numerous countries around the globe. Let's gear up for an inspiring session as George takes us through his incredible journey, sharing stories that oscillate between the hellish struggles and heavenly joys of his Ethiopian odyssey. Please give us a warm welcome to George Balarezo.
Okay, thank you. So let's make this a little bit interactive. So tell me the most adventurous thing that you've ever done in your life. So who wants to raise their hand first? Anyone? It's okay. Don't be shy.
I'll throw a quick
Oh,
one.
sure.
I don't know if it's the most adventurous, but I did do a day trip out of Medellin, Colombia on some local buses that broke down about 10 minutes out of town. So that added a little flavor of adventure that I wasn't quite sure how that was going to go.
Okay, that's good. Sure. How about Robin?
I lived in Honduras for 2 years.
Oh, very
That's
nice.
adventurous.
Traveled various villages, but also lived in some of the major cities, including the capital.
Okay. Muy bien. Good. Anyone else want to share? Yes.
So along the theme of cycling, I'm not an avid cyclist, but I
Okay.
decided that my husband and I could cycle because we were in. So we shipped bikes out there, and I learned very quickly the world is not flat.
The world is not flat, of course.
Yes, and that was a very, for me, it was a very adventurous thing to do. So.
Okay, great. So let's talk today. How does a guy like me become the intrepid global citizen? I'm just an average guy from Michigan here. How does he become unhinged in Ethiopia? So Ethiopia really made me unhinged. You're probably wondering about that question. So today, that's what.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, sure. So today we'll talk about that question. So how do I become unhinged in Ethiopia? An average guy, right? Okay, so it wasn't an overnight thing. This was a gradual process that took about 11 years for me to actually gather up the courage to go to Ethiopia. So I was just an average guy, graduated from university, graduate school, and then was working in an office right down the street in Detroit. And the thing is, I was looking at the computer screen all day long, and I remember looking out the window just thinking, wow, the world's got to be so much bigger than my little desk here. And I knew right from the first day at work, ironically enough, that this job is not for me. And so I thought to myself, what should I do about this? I went through a quarter-life crisis. I thought, okay, let's not, chase money and status. Somehow I've got to get out there and chase adventure. And so the answer, to make a long story short, was to cycle to work. This was back in 2004 when nobody was cycling in Detroit. I'd cycle from downriver in the Wyandotte area all the way up down Jefferson to Griswold Street, right down the street there to my office. And the funny thing is, it took just as much time to cycle to work as it did to travel via car. If you factor in walking time and parking, finding a parking garage and walking to the office. So I thought, wow, okay, this is a nice way to spice up my life a little bit. And then I got into volunteer work in inner city Detroit. I taught a spin-off of the Dale Carnegie program, so I became interested in education through my volunteer work in inner city Detroit. But I thought, okay, I need to do something a little bit more. This isn't enough. So I decided after 3 years at that job, I ended up quitting my job and went to Central America, backpacking. And then that just set everything off. I was never the same again. And in Central America, I was in Guatemala volunteering and teaching English as a second language, and really enjoyed teaching. And I thought, okay, let's make a career shift here. So I picked up a book just by chance at the Riverview Library downriver called Vagabonding. And in this book, the author described a fantasy land where you have 5 months of paid vacation in South Korea as an English teacher. So I thought a big light bulb went off in my head, and I had to find out if this was actually real. And I did some internet research. Mind you, this was back in 2007, 2008, so the internet was around, but it wasn't so big, you know, as we see YouTube and Instagram Reels these days. So I did some research and found out that these jobs are actually out there. So I applied for the job, and to make a long story short, I ended up on a plane to South Korea. And the best thing about living in South Korea was I didn't have to drive a car anywhere. So I live in Seoul. I'm still there now, based out of Seoul. So it was so nice just commuting to work via bicycle, and I was studying Korean language really hard. But a lot of people in Seoul, they see a guy like me, and they want to practice English. So I thought, okay, how am I going to learn the Korean language? And the answer to that was to get out there in the countryside where there's no English at all, with my bicycle, with no map, no GPS. This was back in 2008, and just trying to use survival Korean and my bicycle to get around. So that led to various trips around the Korean peninsula. And mind you, this was back in 2008 when, again, nobody was cycling in Korea either. People would say, oh, you're going from Seoul to Busan, which is about 600 kilometers. And they said, oh, you can't do that. Why would you ever do something like that? You're crazy. But now, here we are in 2025, and if you go to South Korea, there are dedicated bicycle lanes all across the country. And it's a great place to tour cycle. So now I just go 10 kilometers outside of my home in Seoul, and people ask me, are you going to Busan? 600 kilometers away. So things change, right? We see a lot of cyclists here in Detroit. Things change, and cycling has become bigger and bigger in both places. So yeah, these are just some pictures of me cycling across Korea, and I want to stress here that to do these things, you don't need a lot of gear and a fancy bike. So I did this with a $150 bike that one of my friends sold to me, and it worked. I don't know how to repair. I'm not a mechanic, so all I did was ask for help trying to practice Korean language, and it really helps to connect with people. If you need help, you're vulnerable out on the bike, so it's a great way to make friends that way. So here you can see a very crude map. So here I am studying Korean, writing down city names in the Korean alphabet, right, with the kilometer distances here. So this was my style of getting around, not even with a professionally made paper map, but just my crude maps that I make like this by hand. And so to make a long story short, I ended up getting one of these fantasy jobs, 4.5 months of paid vacation teaching in a university to very, very motivated students. If they show up 5 minutes late to class, I get emails saying, oh, I'm so sorry, professor, I was 5 minutes late. Oh, I'll never be late again. So it was like basically a fantasy job for me. Motivated students, 5 months of paid vacation per year, and I'm teaching. So wow, what could be better than this, right? And so it was, so I decided, okay, let's book a ticket to Central Asia. So I booked a ticket to Uzbekistan for one of my first vacations, 2.5 month vacations. And I ended up living with a guy who cycled for 193 countries all around the world for 10 years for Korean reunification. And he cycled all the way across the United States without a seat on his bicycle to symbolize the suffering of people in North Korea. So just living with him for a few years, he kind of rubbed off on me, and we traded a lot of stories. So I thought to myself, hey, I could do this too. So why not take a bicycle with me to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan on the Pamir Highway? So this is my first trip, 2,500 kilometers across Central Asia. And mind you, I had no idea what I was doing. I still had the same $150 bike. I had a $20 fisherman's tent. I had a backpack that I was wearing, which was a big rookie move, according to a lot of the European cyclists who have been cycling all around the world. What I really wanted to do was cycle in this section here. So this is the Wakhan corridor, borders Afghanistan, and here's the Pamir Highway, which goes up to an elevation of 4,300 meters. So I really wanted to experience the nature, experience mountains, and really challenge myself as much as I could. So this was, just another world for me. I remember getting off the plane in Tashkent in Uzbekistan thinking, okay, can I actually do this? What am I doing? I have no idea how to patch a tube, change a tire, change a spoke. So if something happens, I don't know. I just have to ask people for help. And I don't speak Russian, I don't speak Uzbek, and people there don't speak any English, so I just had to survive somehow. And I remember that first day cycling out of the airport in Tashkent, just feeling so free and feeling this was like a sense of immense liberation for me. And it's a great way to slow down and connect with people too. You can see everywhere you go, you're vulnerable, you're talking to people. People are always curious and greeting me in Uzbek and Russian. It's a great way to connect with others like this too. So this is, you can see I'm wearing a backpack in this picture here. So this woman that I'm cycling with, she was from Switzerland, cycling basically from Switzerland to Central Asia. And she said, oh, you're crazy. Why are you wearing a backpack? You're carrying your entire load on your back? That's gotta hurt like crazy, right? And I had everything. I had water, food. I just carried some dried ramen noodles, some nuts, some raisins, basically enough food to keep me alive. And I was going across these big passes like this. So this is in Tajikistan, 4,300 meters high. In the background, we see Karakol Lake, which is the highest elevated lake in the world. So it was just a challenge every single day. And the good thing about being on a bike is you can acclimate to the altitude much more easily than if you're in a car, because you have to constantly work and you're going up at a much more slower pace. So that was something that I discovered as well. And here's my tent, and in this tent, it's just a very flimsy $20 tent. Like I said, I had no idea what I was doing, virtually no preparation, but just a big appetite for adventure, to get out there. And this is where I'd have my dinners of dried ramen noodles and water and nuts and raisins every night. And if I was lucky, some locals were very, very friendly, and they'd wave me into their homes and go like this, and they'd invite me in for stale bread and milk tea too. So anyway, I discovered very quickly that there are so many hospitable people out there in the world. And so you get yourself in these situations. Here I am in a desert in Uzbekistan. It was very hard to find shade. So this is an abandoned gas station where I took a nap for about 2 or 3 hours at the hottest time of the year. In the background on that mat, so that's where I took a nap. So this first trip was very, very eye-opening for me, and instantly I was just hooked. I thought, okay, this is the best way to travel. Like, backpacking is great, but I was backpacked across Colombia, across India a few times before that, but I noticed I was getting a little bit flabby. So this was a great way to combine my two passions of exercise and travel while connecting with people and while getting in touch with nature. So That led to trips in Xinjiang, China, Siberia, and Mongolia. So here you can see an upgrade on my bicycle. This is a $250 used bicycle now. So I went from $150 to $250 bicycle because the roads in Mongolia are pretty rough. You can see on the right side, here's a Mongolian highway. So, and the distances between towns is very, very far. So, and then that led to cycling trips in Turkey in the winter, getting clobbered by snowstorms, and I found myself in some tough situations where I'd have to just knock on people's door and be like this, oh, please help me, please, you know, and people were always very, very friendly and hospitable and ready to help me out. And then to Bangladesh as well. I cycled across Oman as well, and while I was in Oman, I met quite a few migrant workers from Bangladesh, and they were a real fun group of people to hang out with, and I'm very interested in climate change as well, and as you guys probably know, Bangladesh is just suffering because of climate change, and I realized they also have a very big cycling community in Bangladesh, and it's the most densely populated country in the world. Anyway, that's an introduction to some of my cycling journeys that right before Ethiopia. And so what I'll do now is I'll read a section from the book that explains my joy and passion for tour cycling. Okay, during summer and winter vacations, I searched for more challenging destinations beyond Korea. Every journey was a master course in global knowledge and self-discovery. Self-conquest became my joy, and onerous tasks a privilege, a recreation. Extremes shattered my limiting beliefs, and I repeatedly shocked myself. Tour cycling became my new addiction. Fear was my compass, pointing me towards the places I needed to explore. I longed to wobble on a tightrope while becoming my own hero, a person who could inspire me during life's hard times. I hope to look inward amid life's chaos and find a fire of boldness ready to light up the world with positive energy. The fire of true courage would char fear and self-doubt to a crisp. Tour cycling became a way to combine movement and stillness. After every action-packed day in the saddle, I would sit in my tent and observe my breath and bodily sensations. The next morning, as soon as the sun's rays pierced my tent, I spent another hour watching my body's fleeting state of being. 8 to 10 hours of pedaling combined with 2 hours of stillness left my mind quiet and clear. Yeah, so during my backpacking trips, I also spent quite a bit amount of time doing meditation. So it's really, really nice to combine movement and stillness. I still do that here too in my everyday life or in Seoul. I go out for a run, go for a bike ride, and pitch my tent somewhere and just do some meditation, and you can really feel how clear your mind becomes from being outdoors and from exercising. So they say exercise is a positive benefit for the brain, right? So I can feel that much more clearly through my meditation practice. So then we come to Unhinged in Ethiopia. So how do you think I first became interested in Ethiopia? Has anybody tried this food here before? Anybody know what this is? Sure, what is this?
It's injera and water.
Yeah, sure, this is injera. So this bread, it's not really bread, it's made out of teff. And teff is a grain that's only found in Ethiopia. And it's packed full of protein, vitamins and minerals, omega-3s, it's a superfood. And they use it simultaneously as a plate, and they scoop it up like this, like bread, into these little stews, which are called wat. So this was how I got hooked on Ethiopia, was from eating at a place called the Blue Nile in Ann Arbor, if you're familiar with that restaurant.
There's one in Ferndale as well.
There's one in
Yeah.
Ferndale. I heard there was one in Downriver that didn't last very long, and there's an Ethiopian restaurant about a 5-minute bike ride from my place in Seoul, so I'm very, very lucky. But anyway, it was food that first captured my attention. And then I started doing more research about Ethiopia and just realized, like, wow, has anybody heard of the Aksumite Empire before? Okay, yeah, so the Aksumite Empire is another interesting empire. It's on par with the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, but it makes up part of present-day Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, all the way to Yemen and present-day Mecca, even in Saudi Arabia, before the rise of Islam. And how about Rastafari? Anybody heard of Rastafari? Who's Rastafari? Do you know his other name? So Rastafari, probably Bob Marley. Okay, it sounds familiar, right? So this is an emperor. So Ras means governor, and Tafari is a name of an emperor in Ethiopia. But he changed his name to Haile Selassie when he became emperor, and he ruled Ethiopia for about 30 years until 1975. And then he became just like a legendary, and now there's a religion named after him, right? The Rastafarians, which Bob Marley made very famous, right? Yeah, and so in Ethiopia also, it's the only country in Africa that has its own script. It's never been colonized. The Italians came and tried to take over Ethiopia, but they fought the Italians successfully. So I was really, really fascinated by this country. It's like there's so much history and culture there. And Ethiopia actually was a symbol of solidarity during the civil rights movement here in the United States because it's so rich culturally, so rich historically. So you could see a lot of people with the Ethiopian flag when they were protesting during the civil rights movement. So I thought, okay, Ethiopia, this is a dream destination for me. I've got to get there somehow. But if you do any research about cycling across Ethiopia, people, they describe it using one word. How can you guess what that word is? Anyone want to guess? One word to describe Ethiopia. So one word, hell, in one word. So why would people refer to Ethiopia as hell? It's not because of the food. It can't be because of the culture. It's hot. That's a good guess, and it's a hot place. Actually, the hottest place in the world is in Ethiopia. If we look at this map right here, the hottest region in the world is the Afar region, but that's not it. Mountains. It's the most mountainous country in Africa also, but actually it's because of the children, because there's so many stories in Ethiopia about cyclists that are going from Cairo to Cape Town, or Cape Town to Cairo, and they all cross through Ethiopia. And they have stories of children just tormenting them by throwing stones at them. So what are you going to do if children are throwing stones at you and you're on a bicycle? What would you do in that situation? They're kids, right? You can't really get angry at them. I mean, you could get angry at them, but if you don't want to throw stones back at children, right? So the only solution I had to this issue was, okay, let me train myself with the life or death tenacity before I go there. So I remember waking up early in Michigan, winter mornings, running 10 kilometers as fast as I could in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I'd do another session of high intensity interval training. And then just envisioning children throwing me, chasing me, throwing stones at me. So I thought, okay, let me try to outrun them on my bicycle because I'm on a bike, right? And they're going to be running on their feet. So that was my only solution to the problem. And so I decided, okay, let's go. Let's try it. Everybody else, they survived that I read about. So why don't I try this too? So anyway, this is my cycling route in Ethiopia, going from Addis Ababa, the capital city, all the way up to the middle of the Amara region. That's by Lake Tana and Lalibela, which is a famous tourist attraction there, up to the Tigray province, where unfortunately right now there's a lot of political instability in Ethiopia. There's a civil war, and with the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and fighting with other groups in Ethiopia. So I was really lucky that I went there in 2019, because if I would have waited another year, it would have been a disaster, politically. So unfortunately, that's the current situation is not so good either right now in Ethiopia. But anyway, the next section of the book that I'd like to read is about cycling in the Ethiopian highlands. Okay, and when you're on a bike, mind you, you're by yourself all the time and you have a lot of time to think and reflect. So these are some of my reflections too about the love of tour cycling. Coffee and love are best served when hot. Ethiopian proverb. I launched myself on the bike the next morning. I was a bird in flight. With each pedal pump, my heart jumped a few centimeters closer to my throat. My arms tingled with exhilaration as I left the capital city. I was doing it, tour cycling in Ethiopia. I was alive, in alignment with nature. The joy of movement and fresh air, fused with the rush of exploring the unknown, replenished my spirit. For me, the essence of being human lies in my connection with the natural world. No more fluorescent lights, dreary buildings, fans, electric heat, or air conditioning. A vagabond by choice, I was submerged in an ocean of liberation. Tour cycling was my life force. Despite snowstorms in Turkey, torrential rainfalls in South Korea, traffic-clogged cities in Bangladesh, confrontations with corrupt police officers in Tajikistan, and an absence of running water for days in rural Uzbekistan, I had always returned from my tour cycling trips with a newfound energy and a desire for challenge. While on the road, survival was my full-time job. Restaurants and shops sprouted up after hours of pedaling through grasslands, windy mountain pathways, and scorched desert plains. Thirst, hunger, sweat, frostbitten, and sunburned skin became normal. Upon returning to South Korea, life with a roof turned alien and unnatural. I had trouble sleeping in my apartment with a shower, sink, and flushable toilet only steps away. Familiar comforts had become foreign. While on the road, I'd enter a flow state. No time to fret over a breakup. No time to contemplate the digital numbers in my bank account. I escaped to a simple, if challenging, reality. I adapted to everything the world heaved at me. Pedal, eat, drink, pedal, eat, drink, pedal, sleep, repeat, survive. Leaving Addis Ababa, I reflected on my past adventures. My tent had been surrounded by darkness and rifle-carrying Chinese police officers. Barrages of non-existent towns tormented me after I'd depleted my water ration in sun-scorched Uzbekistan desert. In Peshawar, a Pakistani town near the border of Afghanistan, barbershop customers had accused me of being a CIA spy. What surprises lay ahead in Ethiopia? These expenditures have put everything into perspective and reframed my daily routines. Negotiating with my boss was a simple task after using my hands in preschool-level Pashto to convince 30 locals from Peshawar I wasn't plotting a drone strike. There were plenty of jobs, but I only had one life. Heaving weights above my head and flinging myself over pull-up bars was easy. A cooler full of distilled water was an arm's length away. After each journey, I returned home with a newfound zest for life. My trips became metaphors for every routine task. Every book read was a kilometer traveled on the road to knowledge and wisdom. Every hour of meditation was a kilometer traversed on the route to self-understanding, mental clarity, and enlightenment. Every barbell press was a kilometer completed on the trail to an increased lifespan and better brain health. Each minute spent with others was a kilometer traversed on the path of sharing positive energy. Tour cycling gifted me with the tools to attack life with vigor 12 months a year. I cherished every second, day by day, kilometer by kilometer. Okay, so the next section gets into the Ethiopian highlands. So here I am describing the Ethiopian highlands. Men carrying chest-high sticks chased donkeys and goats as animals gradually replaced motorized vehicles. Shepherds yelled and swung their sticks while livestock jumped in pain. Manure stains dotted the pavement, tainting the dry air with putrid fumes peculiar to life. Men were barefoot or wearing sandals. I wondered whether their feet hurt from chasing their animals, or maybe their souls were so callous they were numb to the stones strewn over the terrain. I wanted to give them a South Korean bathhouse tour. I was sure they would have appreciated a soak in tubs of warm water infused with liquid ginseng. People were everywhere. They walked in groups. They stood in circles, laughing and socializing. Squads of teenagers huddled around outdoor pool tables. posses of wrinkled men squatted on wooden stools while sipping coffee out of white and red espresso cups. Gangs of children crouched in front of plates of injera and wat. Salam, I howled as distracted heads turned away from their group banter. The sheer number of people on the streets was overwhelming. After Nigeria, this was Africa's second most densely populated country. Crowds of 20 formed around me when I stopped for water. 20 sets of open palms, 20 sets of glaring eyes, 20 voices shouting the same 4 words. You, China, money, Faranji. Stopping when every person yelled for money was a terrible idea. I wouldn't have moved 10 meters. Being the center of attention was intimidating. Several years ago in Bangladesh, hundreds of faces had surrounded me as I pushed through crowds during water stops. If one person decided I was there for a wrong reason, they'd have stomped me into oblivion. After a few weeks, I became used to the spotlight and discovered locals were the friendliest and most hospitable people in the world. I hope the same was true for Ethiopians. Okay, so where is the best cup of coffee that you've ever tasted? Anyone? Best cup of coffee. Could be down the street here in a coffee shop on Woodward Avenue. Could be somewhere else. Could be in Colombia. Could be Costa Rica. Anyone? Panera Bread. It could be, is it Starbucks maybe? Okay. Okay, all right, there you go. Yeah, so anyway, the coffee history actually starts in Ethiopia. So anybody heard of the story of how coffee was discovered in Ethiopia before? Anyone heard this? Oh, okay, you know, right? So it was discovered by a goat herder named Kaldi, right? You know the story of Kaldi? Okay, so Kaldi, he was a goat herder, and one day he found something funny was happening with his goats. His goats were dancing around in the forest, and he thought to himself, wow, this is strange. I've never seen my goats dancing around in the forest before. What's gotten into them? So he discovered that they could consume these little red berries. So he said, okay, let me take a few of these berries with me. And the monks, these goats have so much energy. Let me take some to the monks in this church because they have trouble staying awake during their prayers. So he collected a bunch of these berries, and just by chance, he roasted them in like this over fire, and crushed them and put them into water, and they discovered, wow, it smells so nice. So let's try, making this into a drink. So they boiled water with the crushed beans there, and lo and behold, they gave the monks the first cup of coffee that had ever been offered in the world. And the monks stayed up all night long, very alert, praying, no issues falling asleep anymore. So this is the discovery of coffee in Ethiopia. And after that, it spread all over the world. So now you guys know the story of coffee. And that happened in the Kaffa province of Ethiopia, hence the name coffee. So, and in Ethiopia, they call it bunna. So there's a whole ceremony around coffee where it's a very slow process. They take the beans there and they roast them so you can smell them. You can smell the coffee getting ready. And they give you a little plate of popcorn so you can taste the popcorn and chat with your friends while you wait for the coffee to be prepared. And then they take the crushed beans after they crush them. They put some incense here for some smell there, and then they put them in this earthenware pot here called a jebena. And then they boil that over a fire. So it's a very slow process. But that's how, in every coffee shop in Ethiopia, you can experience this. So it's very, very nice traditional practice. And also, in Ethiopia, the official leading export is coffee. Who knows what the unofficial leading export is? Anyone? Okay, so you know all about chat, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is chat, so it's pronounced chat. And this brings in 10 times as much revenue as coffee into Ethiopia. And this is illegal in many other parts of the world. I didn't try it when I was there because I just say no, but it's supposed to have certain drug-like effects that act as a stimulant. But anyway, this is a chat shop in Ethiopia. So it's very common to see people on the street there chewing chat and chatting with each other. And this is very much embedded into their traditional culture. If you go to the villages and there's some sort of dispute, elders get together and they chat and chat with each other to resolve issues. So anyway, this is the coffee and chat are two very important parts of Ethiopian culture. And so where do you think I slept on this journey? So here we see a tent, right? So that's my tent. There are hotels in each village for about $3 each. Some of them had running water. Others didn't have running water. Sometimes the hotel owner was very, very hospitable. They'd go off and chop some wood for me and light a fire and give me some hot water to take a shower. And they'd actually take a big cup like this of hot water and dump it over my head. And they insisted on giving me a bucket shower like this. This is Ethiopian hospitality. But I'm a pretty simple guy. I just insisted, no, I don't need hot water. It's okay. Just cold water is fine. I've been cycling all day, but they insisted, okay, we'll make a fire for you and give you some hot water for a hot shower there. But anyway, in this picture, this is a group of villagers. So when I couldn't find a hotel, sometimes I'd stop and ask villagers, do you mind if I camp in your yard? Using body language, and they were always very, very happy to accommodate me. Here, the woman in the background there, she took me into her home there and did the whole coffee ceremony like I just explained, and made injera and coffee for me. And then I saw some raised eyebrows. Why is that guy holding an AK-47 there? You're probably wondering, right? That's the first thing you're wondering. So yeah, it's very common to see villagers carrying big guns like this. They all wave at you, hi, how are you doing, salam, with big smiles on their face, but they're carrying big guns there. So sometimes there can be feuds, over cattle, some goats and cows, people stealing each other's cattle, because animals are essentially money in many places in this part of the world. And even one time I was in a hotel room and I heard gunshots outside. So I thought, oh my gosh, what's happening out there? Do I want to leave this hotel? And then so I went out to the streets and asked one of the hotel workers, hey, what's going on? Is it okay? He said, oh yeah, that was just a wedding party. People are just celebrating, shooting their guns in the air. So you don't have anything to worry about. But anyway, you can see these weapons around Ethiopia quite a bit. And here's another picture of the Ethiopian highlands right outside of Addis Ababa. Mind you, this is the same bicycle I took to Mongolia, $250, but I wizened up and got some panniers now instead of the backpack. It's a little bit more comfortable setup here on the bike. And so the next section I'd like to read is about getting stoned in Ethiopia. And no, we're not talking about cannabis here. So here we go. So I'll read the next section. From the get-go, the bike bounced along the pothole-ridden gravel. My thighs chafed from the pants on skin friction. My glutes pounded the hard seat. My helmet rattled, and my neck was jolted in the seizure of vibrations. Despite the road conditions, the first 15 kilometers were uneventful. A handful of children threw a handful of stones. Nothing I couldn't handle. An hour later, it changed. The quiet, rocky terrain turned into paths of screaming people, and the ruckus directed at me. Teenagers with afro picks jutting out of their hair hurled themselves into my path, yelling, "Farangi, Farangi." Seconds before impact, the youngsters leapt out of the way. As I continued along the road, their pattering feet and panting became louder. I turned my head and saw 5 handlebar-high children stomping after me. Bodies erect, arms pumping, and eyes locked on me. Legs springing off the ground in synchronized cycles. 2 were wearing sandals, and 3 were barefoot. Yet they kept up with me. I smiled and yelled, "Salam, Farangi, Farangi," in a playful tone. One kid was right next to me, and his fingers were only a few centimeters from my handlebars. The little guy wore a purple t-shirt coated with beige dust, and pebble-sized balls of mucus dangled from the corners of his eyes. They needed shade and a drink. Whatever the case, their pace became swifter as I sped up to shake them. Seconds later, chanting overpowered the footsteps. Money, money, banana, banana, mango, mango, trousers. I glanced over my shoulder once more, and the group of 5 had transformed into a mob of 30. What the? I yelled. An entire elementary school class was hounding me. Most of the children had weathered feet accustomed to running on the rocks and sharp gravel. They kept a good pace and didn't tire. How could they keep up with a guy on a bike? I'd never seen runners like this before. The sheer number of children chasing me was overwhelming, and I chuckled in disbelief. This is why Ethiopia produced the world's best runners. George, Ibalu, Minis Negarada, I said, riding alongside the children. My name is George. What's new? I added. Samaman no, Astamari. What's your name? I'm a teacher. Give me the pen, give me the money. China, China. Their yelps turned impatient. Ikwar Halu Bakta, I shouted. Where are you from? I love you, please. Money, money. They held out their palms and shoved my handlebars mid-stride. My balance became shaky, and it was harder to steer my bike in the right direction. I glanced behind me as small hands grabbed my bags. Money, money, give me the money. Their voices were chorused. I raised my clenched fist, furrowed my eyebrows, flashed my incisors, and screamed in wild aggression. Yeah! Keep balance, grab handlebar. Squeals of laughter rang through the air. Banana, mango, money, farangi, farangi. They surrounded me on both sides and from behind. Come on, give me space. I swerved in a zigzag motion, forcing several to run into a roadside ditch. This isn't fun anymore. As soon as a kid quit, 2 more sets of fresh-legged children jumped into the mix, scavenging for money, bananas, and mangoes. The louder I yelled, the harder they pulled and grabbed, and the closer I came to a plunge. Ditch on the left, steep drop to the right, injury or death. I sped up and decelerated, swerved and twisted. My erratic path created space between myself and the troublemakers. Soon I couldn't control the bike. Their pulls and tugs were too much. I channeled the inner rage to my calves and hamstrings. As sun-charred bushes and giant boulders flew by at speeds I deemed impossible 30 minutes ago, my chain clicked and clamored from the tension. My legs were numb with strength, and blood rushed through my thighs in streams of desperation. The kids were right behind me, never letting up. I'd never seen speeds and persistence like this before. Adults roared in laughter at the Farangi on a bike being chased by a mob of children. No one came to my rescue. I was a clown on display for the village's entertainment, a laughingstock, a guy who lost his bananas while children tormented him. Boom! What on earth was that noise? Did a tube explode? Did a spoke snap in half? Did the sound of a rock crashing into my cranium hit my ears before the hammer-pounding sensations wreaked havoc on my head? I hopped off the bike and did a quick scan. My pannier rack had collapsed onto my rear tire. The jolting and grabbing must have put too much stress on the bottom joints. I turned into a demon. I'm a Sekinaru, I screamed while waving my index finger at the kids in disapproval. Thank you. My face was a blast furnace. Beads of sweat stung my eyes and dripped down my chin. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop on a pile of teff. Children elbowed and pushed to get a closer look. Teeny fingers circled my broken rack. Screams turned to whispers. Mischievous smiles changed into looks of concern. It was as if a buddy had sprained an ankle during a football game. Only this buddy was a chunk of metal. The same hands that had swindled items out of my panniers attempted to mend my rack. Together, they hoisted a collapsed joint and rested it on my tire's quick-release bar, a clever temporary solution. Suddenly, an adult clenching a baseball bat-sized stick popped into the mix. Face red and fists ready to attack, he confronted all 30 children while shouting in Amharic. He raised the club over his shoulders and aimed for the bleachers. Whoosh! Screams of fear lit up the air as the youngsters stepped back. Hallelujah! Allah Akbar! the Ethiopian Barry Bonds. I wanted to hug the fellow and treat him to an all-you-can-eat injera dinner, but survival trumped everything else. While the enraged man fended off the use, I crept down the switchback road. The rocks and potholes didn't jive well with my broken joint. My rack creaked and pleaded for relief. As I continued along the road, sounds of horror interrupted the silence. Plop, plop. Hadn't Barry Bonds' home run swing signaled the end of Hell's Highway? The kids were long gone, right? Like resurrected ghosts, the youths reappeared. One at a time, their thin bodies popped up on the hillside, close enough to continue their onslaught. A chill seeped through my polyester shirt amid the sweltering heat. Their paranormal energy weighed on me. It must have been their phantom palms thrusting my bike to the gravel, rendering it too heavy to escape. My intelligence plummeted as my thoughts became incomprehensible strings of words in several languages. Nasilsen, Honbibeksan, Vedespet. Rocks landed around me in sets of 4 or 5. Dust kicked up from the road. Mini grenade explosions. A golf ball-sized rock 1 meter in front of me, another, the size of a tennis ball, hit the ground an arm's length to the right of my rear tire. It was hailing rocks, and if a kid hit the bullseye, I'd have been left dead in the desert sun, a snack for the lions at sundown. So I'll end that section there. And how did I get out of that? You'll have to read the book. So I'll leave you on a cliffhanger there, but I'm here, right? Everything's fine. You can see no scars on my face. So anyway, that's Ethiopian in the Ethiopian highlands. So if you look at the subtitle of the book, I named it Hell and Heaven on a Bicycle. So that was my version of hell. But a few hours later, I ran into a heavenly experience. So I arrived to Lalibela, and this is the most famous place in all of Ethiopia. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But after having all those kids chase me, all I wanted was to get to my hotel room, get a meal in me, and just stare at a wall. I was just so tired and drained from that experience mentally. So on my way to a restaurant there in the town of Lalibela, a guy started yelling at me again, "Hey, Faranji," which means foreigner, obviously. I stick out a lot because of my skin color. "Hey, Faranji, Faranji." And there was a group of people where he was near his home, a big congregation. So he was waving me in and going like this. And so I scanned the environment first for children, because I was very traumatized by children then. I was like, okay, there's no children here, all right, so let's see what he wants. And lo and behold, there's a huge wedding party there. And so he ended up showering me with food. We went out dancing after that, and he was trying to set me up with his sister too there. So this was like hell and heaven in the same day within a few hours. So every day was like this in Ethiopia. But that's really a microcosm of life, right? I mean, in life we have our ups, we have our downs. So I like to say that this trip was like 10 years of life experience compressed into 5 weeks, because it was so all extremes like that. But anyway, this is Lalibela. If you ever get a chance to go to Ethiopia, I'm sure you'll visit this place. So these are some rock-hewn churches created by local artisans and craftsmen. So, and who else do you think helped in the construction of these churches? Can you guess? Okay, the kids maybe. Don't use the logical part of your brain here. So the people there, they like to say that angels helped them construct the church here. So angels helped with the construction. There are 11 of these rock-hewn churches, which is very, very beautiful to see in Lalibela. But unfortunately, right now in this region of Ethiopia, there's civil war. That guy that I mentioned that invited me to the wedding party, he became a refugee and had to leave the town of Lalibela, and wrote me several emails after this trip just detailing just horrible things that are happening there right now. So anyway, you can read a little bit more about that in the book. So the next region I visited was a place called the Afar Triangle, or the Danakil Depression, which is in the north part of Ethiopia. And this is the hottest region in the world. So it's got the highest ever recorded temperature, the highest average temperature in the world. And people, they've been living like this. They live a nomadic life because they try to find regions that are a little bit cooler where they can settle. So this is a traditional house, what it looks like in this region of Ethiopia. And what's special about this is salt flats too. So you can see the second largest section of salt flats in the world after in Bolivia. And to the right, you can see this is a little pool of water here. So if you go, I actually went swimming in here, and this is the water is so saturated with salt that it feels like molasses. Essentially, you're trying to submerge yourself in this pool of water, but the buoyant force is so strong that it's actually hard to submerge yourself in that water. And then you get out, after getting out, dry yourself off, and then you become like a white ghost covered in salt. So this was a place that I had never seen before. Very fascinating. But you're probably wondering, did I ride my bike through this part of Ethiopia? The hottest place in the world. So actually they won't let you ride a bike due to safety reasons. There were some attacks on tourists, so they said, okay, you have to go with a guide there in a car. So I threw my bike to the side for a few days and got in a vehicle, and I had a local guide show me around this part of Ethiopia. But the next part I'll read is about a salt miner. So people, they make a living here by mining salt. And this is me just observing these salt miners. And I talk about some of the reflections here about this. Okay. I got out of the car and stood in the middle of the world's second largest salt flat, one of the lowest locations on Earth. It hadn't always been this way. Tens of thousands of years ago, oceans covered afar. Salt remained from the dried sea, but the primary reason for the white, crunchy grains lay between my feet. A huge volcanic engine drew salt water from the nearby Red Sea, pushing it through the Earth's crust. Sedimentary rocks deposited in marine settings were horizontal, but these stones tilted along massive cracks in the Earth's surface, acting as fault zones. Rail-thin men used pickaxes to split, lift, and shape the salt into slabs. Miners hoisted pearly blocks of salt above their waists and loaded them onto camels and donkeys. Their strength would have baffled a powerlifter. I turned away as glistening faces grimaced in pain. Bloodshot eyes stared through me. Their gazes communicated everything. Don't stand there and watch, you spoiled wimp. I turned my attention to a guy with a gray hooded sweatshirt, blue shorts, and neon green sandals. He was half my size, yet heaved blocks of dead weight onto his camel's back as sweat glistened on his shaved head. The man's choice of clothing had me intrigued. How could he wear a hoodie in this unforgiving heat? His ancestors had lived this way for over 2,000 years, and his body was biologically primed for superhuman feats of endurance. It was February in Afar, and maybe the heat didn't faze him. Historical records from 1911 stated the villagers worked naked during summer months. Perhaps he felt chilly during Afar's version of winter. His eyes locked with mine for a few seconds. His stare sent an electric chill through my torso. My arms shivered amid a blazing inferno. I clenched my fists and my shoulders tensed. This was his turf. What was I doing there? Was this ethical tourism? Maybe he didn't appreciate others gawking at him. My eyes darted to the bottle of water in my hands. He cupped his palms together and tilted his head back, asking if he could have a drink. A swimming pool of thoughts flooded my imagination. I wanted to teleport him to an oasis, send him to Michigan with me in the summer, and give him a vacation while exchanging our life stories over fresh cherries and strawberries. He deserved it after a grueling work schedule of 365 days a year. This guy needed water, and our vehicle's trunk was full of it. I was on an all-the-water-you-can-drink tour. None of the villagers stopped to rehydrate. How did they keep going? I could switch places with the man before me. He'd cool off in the air-conditioned SUV while I loaded up the animals. Why did we have so much liquid? We weren't doing manual labor in the Earth's hottest region. Women typically made water runs at 2 a.m., leaving their homes with donkeys and returning at 11 a.m. My water run was only a few steps, and in 2 days, we'd never go through all the bottles in the back of our truck. I handed the miner my drink. A few giant gulps later, he tossed the empty bottle to the side. Then he continued strapping blocks of salt to his animals. This for $2.75 at the end of a 12-hour day. All right, so that's reflections about this place. You know, it just makes you think. Thankful to have water, right? Water very close to me right here, and running water in the bathroom. So anyway, the Danakil Depression is also home to these sulfur flats here. This is sulfuric acid. And if you've ever been around sulfuric acid before, it smells like rotten eggs. It's just amazingly beautiful, but at the same time so hot, and the smell is just so putrid. It's just an incredible place. The scientists actually go here to study microbes called extremophiles because of the extreme environment, and they do that to study extraterrestrial life. So this should be a UNESCO heritage site, but you can just kind of roam around freely wherever you want. I mean, there's no fences, nothing. It's just open for you to go explore there. So very fascinating place here in the Danakil Depression. So another famous, something very famous about Ethiopia is the rock climbing monks. So we're not talking about hiking up mountains, we're talking about monks that are usually elderly in their 70s and 80s and scale vertical walls to get to their monasteries. So in this particular place, I cycled about 6 hours off of the main road in Ethiopia, and then hiked another hour in the mountains. And then this vertical wall comes up like this. I have absolutely no experience rock climbing. So what would you do in this situation? Turn back or give it a shot, going up the wall? You cycled 6 hours, you're hot, you're tired, you hiked another hour to get up this mountain, and then you see this wall. And then there were 3 monks in their 70s trying, oh, just go up there. Come on, you go, come on. What do you do in that situation? Who would go up the wall? Anyone? Okay, who would turn back? Okay, all right, some of us would probably turn back, right? All right, so I decided to try to go up the wall. So the next section I'll read is me attempting to scale this wall. Okay. The priests motioned to me, you up. These guys had been making the trek their entire lives. Their presence gave me confidence. God had to be on my side. I glared at the heavens and asked the saints to catch me. You, go up, they repeated. I pried off my shoes and socks so my feet could better grip the rock and started. The desert heat rose off the sandstone. I jammed my toes and fingers into the rocky grooves and pulled myself up. After a few steps, I glanced down and realized I was 3 body lengths high. The sweat on my hands welded to granules of stone until my fingers slipped free from the small holes. I jerked my body closer to the wall's face and hung on for dear life. The helpers formed a group around me and guided my every move. Right hand here, left hand, left leg, right leg. Are you stupid? If you fall backwards, you're done. Shut up, George. Thrust yourself up there. Focus. I clung to the wall and tried to halt the useless self-talk. Left, wood. They pointed to a frail tree branch embedded in a crack. Wrist shaking, I grabbed it. Unstable, whoa. Hand slipped, left arm flailed. My heartbeat stopped. I pictured myself gliding through the air, my fall broken by a pile of rocks. No wood, wood not good, I said, panting frantically. Desperate to move upward, my arms continued to vibrate as I regained balance. Here, the man said at the bottom, pointing to a groove in the stone. I grabbed the wedge and uprooted myself, my back and forearms burning from fatigue. A priest catapulted himself to the top ledge and stood above me, arm extended. The end grew near. I gazed down as two other guys directed me. My eyes focused on my toes to plan the next step. The horror, damn peripheral vision, no other way of getting it done. A minuscule part of my 3 largest toes supported my entire weight. The steep drop shot electric chills through me. My torso and legs trembled. Come on, a little more. I took a few deep breaths through my nose to calm myself and stop the shaking. Out of nowhere, my mind became clear. Coordination razor sharp. God sent me his energy and vigor, or maybe my adrenaline response shifted to overdrive. The ghastly structure turned into a simple flight of stairs with railings. I yanked myself up and gasped for air on the ledge. Amaseki naru, amaseki naru. I folded my hands and bowed to the priests. I stared at my accomplishment with pride. It looked every bit as treacherous from above, but the euphoria of completing an arduous task cleared my head of cobwebs and trivial worries. 3 seasoned men had helped me do it. It wasn't a victory over the wall, it was a triumph over myself. I shattered my limiting beliefs that day, showing myself I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. All right, so once you scale the wall, then you have this section here. So as we can see, this section too is hair raising in and of itself. I mean, there's only about a foot or two before you drop several thousand meters. I mean, there's nothing there, no fence or anything to hold on to. So this was a hair raising experience. You just go around the corner there for about 10 to 12 meters. And then you see this monastery. It's basically a cave in the side of a mountain there. And then you can see there on the bottom, there's some sheepskins Bibles there, written in the ancient language of Jez, which predates the language of Amharic and the traditional language of Ethiopia. So in this, and then we can see some paintings of Ethiopian saints on the wall there. So I had a nice meditation session. I don't go to church, but I do meditation every day. So I did some nice meditation to calm myself down after that hair-raising experience. So it was really nice to be in there. And then how do you think I went down? So going up was okay, but it's even scarier going down, right? So what do you think happened? Did I just jump down? Maybe. So this is very, very, very interesting too. So the 3 priests that helped me scale the wall, they were waiting for me the whole time. And they were waiting with a rope, luckily. But then they said, okay, if you want to use this rope, then you have to pay us. So I said, okay, what do you want? Like, I'll give you my entire bank account, everything. I'll give you all my clothes off my back, whatever you want. This Detroit Tigers shirt for a souvenir. If you want it, it's yours, right? So luckily, I had some cash on me. I can't remember, it was like $10 or $5. I said, here, take whatever you want. So I was able to get down successfully. Okay, and then this is another interesting experience here. This place. So I had cycled probably 8 hours, getting started early in the morning, about 6, 7 a.m. And then it was midday came, and I was tired and sweaty and hot, and I was just looking for a place to rest. So I found a place that was selling water and injera to just hang out for a bit. And then a guy started talking to me in one of the small villages. And I said, oh, this is interesting. There's not many people with English skills like this in the villages of Ethiopia. And he said, oh, actually, there's a monastery right in that direction. If you walk 2 hours that way, when he was pointing right beyond that rock, he said, there's a monastery there, and it's got magical powers. He said, I came here because I was addicted to drugs, I was addicted to alcohol, I was addicted to sex, and then I went to this monastery, and I've been there for a month, and I'm clean now. I have no cravings. This place is incredible. You have to see it. He's like, don't worry, I'm not going to try to convert you to my religion, or anything. Don't worry about that. Just take it as a traditional Ethiopian experience. Just come with me, and you can see what the magic is all about. He said there's cancer patients there with terminal cancer, HIV, and they all get cured there. So what would you do? You meet this guy, you're dead tired, What do? You go for a walk 2 hours in that direction to the monastery, or do you say, no, thank you? Who would go on that walk? Who would say, no, thank you, I'm tired? Okay, some of us, okay, all right. So anyway, of course, you have to go, right? So I have to say yes. I'm a yes man, and when these experiences present themselves. So, but before we entered the monastery, he said, okay, now here we are. But before you enter the monastery, you have to get baptized. We have to get all of the evil out of you. So I was like, okay, in that water right there, I'm so hot and sweaty. Sure, get me under that stream of water there. So this is where I became baptized. So we together, my friend Henok was his name, we went there and stripped down and got under these streams of water. It's cordoned off because there's a men's section and a women's section. So that's the men's section there. So I really got a nice bath before entering that monastery. And so here's the monastery grounds look like this. This is the congregation outside there. And then we see tents set up for people that are spending extended amounts of time there as well. And you could see all sorts of people there. There were some people that were in handcuffs, and they had their ankles chained together. So I asked my friend, hey, what's going on with these people? And he said, oh yeah, that guy, he's a murderer. He killed, several people. He's here to get the evil out of him. And for a punishment, the head monk makes him bow in front of a mural of Jesus several thousand times per day so he can get the evil out of him. So, okay, that's interesting. Anyway. And so what was nice about this, I was obviously stood out there due to my skin color, but the head monk came to find me right away, and then he insisted I sleep in his bed. So he had a bed perched on top of this little hill in this concrete structure there, and everybody else slept in these tents. And he said, "Okay, you are our guest, so you please sleep in our bed, in my bed." And I said, "No, thank you. I'm just an average guy. I'm fine sleeping in these tents with my friend, no problem." But my friend Henok, who had committed all of these sins, he's like, "Oh no, this is a special situation." Because if you sleep in the head monk's bed, then I get to sleep in the room too. And that's good for me because I get points. So the angels will give me points and I'll be cleansed even more. So I said, okay, all right, I'll do it for you. So I took the monk up on his offer and said, okay, just for my friend, to help out my friend, I'll sleep in the bed there. So that was a fun experience. And then the following evening, and then my friend asked me, "Hey, by the way, before we go to sleep tonight, can you stand well?" I said, "Stand well? Why?" He said, "Oh, there's a church service at 3 a.m. and we have to stand for 3 hours during that church service." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure, let's go. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? Attend a service in Ethiopia." And it was interesting that we were in a room probably about a little bit smaller than this here, full of maybe 100 people, and they were passing around Bibles and sheepskin Bibles, and everybody would take turns kissing the Bible about 3 times. You kiss it 3 times, and they'd pass around a cross too, and they'd kiss the cross like this. So then I was thinking to myself, okay, here I'm exhausted, I'm short on sleep, All right, the Bible comes around to you. Everybody, close to 100 people have puckered up to this Bible. What do you do in that situation? Who would kiss the Bible in that situation? Okay, who would just pass it along and say, "No, thank you"? Remember, all eyes are on you. You're the guest of honor, right? So of course I had to pucker up. I puckered up to the cross. I puckered up to the Bible. Probably, I can't even count, maybe about 50 times during 3 hours. So then what happens to me after that? I find my way back to Addis Ababa, and I'm sicker than I've ever been before. I don't know if it was because of puckering up. I could have been tired from close to 4 weeks on the road, but it was just the oddest illness I've ever had. I was delirious, crying and laughing at the same time, all these emotions. I had shivers, I felt feverish, I was so weak I couldn't even set up my tent in a yard. I set up my tent and just quit and had to just pass out for 2 hours on my plastic tarp there, and then try again to set up my tent. I was so ill and that was my last day in Ethiopia. Not to mention, to get to the airport I had to take a bus, and on that bus ride a woman threw up in the back of my bus, so I had some germs very close to that bag right there. And the bus driver just took some leaves and said, "Okay, there, your bag is fine, sir. I'll clean it for you. You're my guest, don't worry." So all the combination of all of these things happening probably got me sick. I don't know, it could have been yellow fever, it could have been malaria, I don't know, but I'm here, right? So here I am. But it really unhinged me. So all of these experiences really unhinged me. And so I read to you my final reflections. Okay. The children of Ethiopia instilled lessons in humility. Stones can break my bones, which heal themselves, but humility lasts a lifetime. Before my trip, I thought I've accomplished so much in the realm of adventure travel. The kids knocked me off my pedestal by making me their target practice dummy. They showed me that the superhuman who'd cycled along the Pamir Highway and pedaled against balance-shaking headwinds in the Gobi Desert was a foolish guy with an inflated ego. I was a man who couldn't control his temper and fought stones with more stones. Troops of humans half my size bullied me on their playground. It was an enormous wake-up call, a reminder that I was nothing, an indication that any slip-up, any spout of fury, any rage-inflicted reaction was my fault. Between any stimulus and response was a space of time, and I needed to use that time more wisely. Being sick in my tent was one of my happiest moments. I observed my bodily sensations with perfect equanimity. 1 second, a hammer pounded into my forehead. The next, hot coals dug deep into my scalp, followed by another bout of chills. The seasons of life were wrapped up into one evening, and I lay there, my face wet with tears, smiling in the moonlight. I knew I could handle any challenge the heavens threw at me, even if it was self-inflicted. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Like a superior educator, Ethiopia made me believe in myself. In the future, when the rocks of difficulty strike, the blood will dry up, turn into a scab, and the wound will heal itself. The scars are a reminder of life lessons. So anyway, I would compare this to like just the happiness of being sick and in pain, but still happy, as maybe an Ironman, finishing an Ironman or a marathon when you're so in pain, you've been training for something for so long, you've been dreaming about running that marathon since you were for 10 years, and then you actually do it, right? And then when you get to the finish line, you're just so painful, your body is just sore, but then you're happy, right? You're just elated. So that was what I experienced there. That's the only way to explain that emotion that I went through. So anyway, this is that's the church that I forgot to mention before, where everybody gets healed, and those are my final reflections. So the big takeaway here is that I mentioned a lot of hard situations in Ethiopia, and it's always fun for the audience to listen about somebody else suffering, right? So that's why I focused on those stories, but there are also a lot of heartwarming experiences I had with in Ethiopia, connecting with other people, especially the adults. The adults were great there. So just the children, some issues, but all of the adults, very sweet, pure people. I got invited into so many homes for injera and coffee. And so that's what I'd like to stress, that the world is a beautiful place, and its people are out there waiting for you to make friends with them. So we might see a lot of bad news on CNN, on all the news networks, whatever you watch. But if you really get out there, people are very pure and friendly. And that's what I've experienced every place that I've ever been. So don't be afraid, don't hesitate to cycle from work to your home or to cycle across Brazil during your summer vacation. You'll have to ask your dad about that. But yeah, so just get out there, get out of your comfort zone little by little, and enjoy life as much as you can. So now I'll read to you this quote: "Tough times create tough minds, and the potential of a tough mind is limitless." I said that. So that's my quote. And now I'll entertain questions. So who would like to ask the first questions? What question do you have? Yes.
George, about the religion in
Sure.
Ethiopia.
Yes.
There looked like a lot of Christianity
Yes.
there, but that
Yes.
surprises me.
Yes.
Is that true? Is it largely Christian, or is it?
Yeah, Orthodox
Muslim?
Christianity. Yeah, so in Ethiopia, and they're praying in the middle of the night too, so you can hear a lot of times like the priest over the loudspeaker, kind of like if you go to a Muslim country, you hear the sound 5 times a day. But there is, in the north, in the Tigray region, there's a group of Muslims too in Ethiopia, and also a sizable Jewish population in Ethiopia. They have a lot of Ethiopian Jewish. Yeah, good question. Sure. More questions? Yes.
In one of your excerpts, you read about something was your compass, but literally, did you have a compass?
Oh, a compass.
I know you talk
Yeah.
about
Oh,
the
yeah. Good
map.
question.
The map.
Sure.
Do you carry a compass to know where to go?
Oh, that's a good question. So this trip was in 2019, and I didn't have a smartphone then.
That's what I'm saying.
So I'm a late adapter. I bought this smartphone. I bought finally in 2021, just for the camera. Essentially, I was looking for cameras, and I realized, oh, it's just cheaper to buy a smartphone and use the camera that way. So on this trip, it's pretty easy to find your way around, because you can just say, oh, Bahidar. You just say a city name and point. Bahidar, like that. And so that's how I got around, basically.
Just
Or
some
Addis
roads are
Ababa.
just dirt and stuff, and, just doesn't look like you could know unless you run into a town, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there are some major roads, and the major roads run east-west, north-south, so you can just say, okay, as long as and there are signs too.
Okay.
So you can see if you're going towards Addis Ababa, for example, then you can see signs, okay, the road splits here, Addis Ababa is that way, or Bahidar is this way. So, or just ask people, using, because they all know their city names, right? We can communicate that way. Yeah, good question. Yes.
So you kind of get the impression with some of the images and some of the stories you shared that it's sort of it's hot and barren.
Okay.
But when you go up into the mountains and there are the coffee farms,
Sure.
how lush is that? Have you been? Did you get to explore some of that?
Oh, I didn't go to that region of Ethiopia. And that's the great thing about Ethiopia. There's so much to see. So I had to make a choice here. Do I go north? Do I go west, south? So there's also another place called Harar that's on the border of Djibouti there. That's also famous for mangoes, famous for coffee. It's a very old city that I'd love to visit someday. And then you can go in the other direction to the western part of the country, and they have like Hamir tribes, just tribes of people that if Barack Obama went there, nobody would identify him, nobody would know who he was, somebody famous, just that have been living in this type of life for thousands of years. They're still living that way. So I didn't get a chance to go to that part. Hopefully one day. Yeah. Ethiopia is just so much to see there. Yeah, sure. Another.
One more.
Yeah.
You encountered people that you said were nomadic.
Okay.
Did you get to engage with them and just like understanding? You speak about liberation, the
Oh,
liberation of not necessarily being attached to any one place, but
Sure.
always sort of on the move according to whatever your needs are, really.
Oh, sure. Yeah, when I encountered the people from afar that were nomadic, actually I was on a guided tour, and it was they were used to having tourists there. I mean, they had, like you saw the stick homes, right? My guide just set up like a little cot there, and I was sleeping outside on a cot next to those little homes, but I didn't get to speak so much with them. I talked to the guide quite a bit, and he was trying to explain as much as he could. Yeah, because I was one of many tourists there. So it was a bit harder to connect with people in that situation. Yeah, good question. Sure, more questions? Yes, in the back.
I'm not there to relate to this beginning, but I was wondering, what was your inspiration for going to Ethiopia in the first place? Like, what attracted you to it and all of that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I mentioned this in the beginning, but at first it was food, to be honest with you. It was dining at the Blue Nile restaurant in Ann Arbor, and after finding out about the food, I just researched quite a bit about Ethiopia and learned about the Aksumite Empire, which is one of the most influential empires after Rome and Persia, and then realized that they had fended off the Italian colonists. So they're the only country in all of Africa not to have been touched by colonization. And then Rastafari, you've probably heard of, is Ethiopian too, also known as Haile Selassie. So there was a whole religion formed around him. And there are some Rastafari villages that I didn't get to visit either in Ethiopia too. So just all of these, just such a fascinating place culturally and historically. And also the mountains and landscape, most mountainous country in Africa, that has the hottest region in the world, and rock climbing monks, like all of these things just, attracted me to Ethiopia. Yeah, good question. Yes.
Just logistically, did you carry all of your cash the entire trip?
No, that's a good question. So I usually have a credit card, and there's ATMs in
Okay.
major cities you can pull money from, yeah. Yeah, so I try not to carry cash on me if I can. Yeah, good question. Yeah, good.
When did you realize you would have enough material to like write a book? Did you go
Oh.
thinking you were going to write a book?
Oh, that's a good question. So writing the book, actually, I returned from this trip, and then I said, wow, so many things happened on this trip. This was like a mind-blowing experience for me. So I sat down on my computer, and I was like, I have to get these down while they're fresh in my head. So I sat down to type, and before I knew it, I had more than 200 pages. And then I said, okay, I've always wanted to write a book, so why don't we write a book about Ethiopia? Ethiopia, like for the target audience for this is more like people that are cycling from Cairo to Cape Town, and they're dreading going into Ethiopia because of all the stories. So I'm like, okay, why don't I write a book focusing on Ethiopia to give the reader or the cyclist an idea of what it's like, what they can expect when they're there. So, but for me, Ethiopia was the whole point of going here. I didn't want to cycle from Cairo to Cape Town. I really wanted to focus on this one country. And but after that, the pandemic hit, and I was stuck inside in Seoul. So this was very much a pandemic book. So I sat in my apartment and attended writing critique groups via Zoom all over the United States, even in the UK, and got the manuscript critiqued like at least 50 times and refined my writing skills that way. And it became a book eventually. Yeah. It took 3 years. Actually, writing the book was much more difficult than cycling across Ethiopia, believe it or not. So, yeah, good question. More questions? Anyone else? Yes.
So what's next?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'll be going to Uganda, another cycling trip across Uganda. Starting January 20th for 5 weeks. So I'm excited about that. There's a loop that you can do, like trans-Ugandan bikepacking route that does a loop around the country. So who knows, another book might be coming soon, right? Yes.
What do your parents think about this?
That's good. Let's ask them what do you think about this. You can see them come face palms here.
My son's in Uganda, and they go, oh no.
Yes. Very nice question.
Is it nerve-wracking?
He's going
It's
to
worrisome.
Uganda. I said, where are you going? I said, I want to go to Ecuador after this or something that nice, you know. I said, no, going to Uganda. So I Googled Uganda last night. Uganda,
Google.
they have this, somewhere they have some impenetrable mountains, somewhere in the east or something. It's impenetrable. And they're full of gorillas. And I said, you know, I don't think you should go there. He said, no. He says, he reminded me. He says, no, I want to go there.
Of course.
You might get lost there, George. He says, That's my problem, he says. So there you go.
That's our son.
So, you know.
I get my stubbornness from my
So-
father.
So I know, you know, if he has something on his mind, you have to stay away from it. You know, because if you start, you know, say, don't do this, don't do that, well, it's worse.
Right, everybody tells you not to do something, it makes you want to do it more, right? Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, how long does it take you to adjust when you come back to your apartment and you're not traveling and you're teaching again?
Oh yeah, that was like a surreal experience, especially coming back from this trip. You know, I was just so happy, like, wow, all my students are here, and if I give them a lot of homework, they're not gonna throw stones at me. Wow, this is great, you know. But yeah, usually a couple of weeks or so, but I'd like to stress also that while you're on a trip like this, you're outside all the time, sleeping in a tent, you know, you're in connection with nature. So I really feel like it's just a different state of mind I get in after completing a trip like this that lasts sometimes up to several months. So for 1 to 2 months after, I'm just on a high, like nothing could bother me, you know, and just, okay, yeah, there's food, water, everything I need here, right? There's nothing to worry about, right? So it just really puts everything into perspective. And it's really helpful just being outside when you're on these trips. Just being inside is kind of is very different and foreign. Being inside a building, because you're cycling all day, sleeping in a tent, you know, doing the same thing over and over again. So just getting outside of the sun sometimes feels like a luxury. Oh, my eyes can rest from the sunshine, or my skin can rest from all the redness and sunburn. So it takes a while to get used to it. Yeah, good question. Yes, in the back.
Just wondering, when you first told people that you wanted to do a writing trip to Ethiopia, did they think you were crazy for saying that? And then also when you got to Ethiopia, did anyone tell you that you were crazy for biking through there? And also, did you run into any other Americans that were biking there the same as you were?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, you know, when I say I'm going to Ethiopia, most people don't know much about Ethiopia. So they, oh, okay, Ethiopia. They know that I go to different countries and cycle around, but only the people that really know about, you know, what it's, you know, other cyclists might know and think, oh, you're crazy. Somebody else that's, you know, done the research, they might say that to me, right? So nobody really said that to me, but the people around me, they kind of expect it already. They're like, oh yeah, of course you would do something like that. Yeah. And what was your other question?
Did you meet any other Americans there who
Oh,
did
that's
the same way you were?
Sure, that's a good question. I didn't meet any other Americans. Actually, I met one guy who stayed in the same hostel that I was in from New Zealand, who was also teaching in a different city in South Korea. And it was his second or third time in Ethiopia. And he was on his vacation too, and he said he wanted to come back to Ethiopia. So that was a funny coincidence. And then I also met a guy from Japan who was cycling from Cape Town up to Cairo along the way, going through Ethiopia. And he was just trying to get out of there as quickly as he could. And he thought I was kind of crazy for wanting to focus on Ethiopia and stay there. But he was just putting his head down. He had his headphones on and just trying to get to Sudan as quickly as he could. Yeah, so he was he's even crazier than I am. You can read about him in the book. That guy has done some crazy things. Yeah, sure. Good question. Yes.
When you started to travel like this, did you have experience of culture shock?
Not really. I mean, culture shock always excites me, I think. So I get reverse culture shock coming back to the United States too, you know, because I've just been living in South Korea for so long, and so when I see people indoors with their shoes on, for example, it just freaks me out. I'm like, wow, what are you doing? You're inside, your shoes should be off, right? Or when our family eats dinner together, usually you wait for the elder person to start eating first, and then everybody else starts eating, but my brother just starts eating when he's hungry. I'm like, whoa, 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 let's wait for dad, he's old. Let's wait for the eldest to eat first. Kind of all these things are reverse culture shock too. I have a lot of coming back here. Yeah, so good questions. Yeah, yes?
You haven't convinced your brother to travel with you?
Yeah, I don't know. He's more of a stay-at-home kind of guy. I don't think he likes to listen to my stories, but I don't think he's the type that wants to cycle across Ethiopia. I try to get him to train with me and run, and sometimes he'll just do a little bit, and that's enough. Okay, I'm done. So I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, good question. Sure. More questions? Yes. Okay, in the back. Yes.
How long did, say if you want to go to Ethiopia, like how long did it take you to get there, and like what is the price to get there, and what are like basically it take you a long time just to get there in the first place?
Oh, sure. That's a good question. So there are direct flights from Seoul to Addis Ababa via Ethiopian Airlines. So that's really nice. It's about a 12 to 13 hour flight. And the price back then, this was 2019, about $900 maybe, round trip ticket you can get. Yeah. So pretty affordable. And if you're on a bike, cycling costs nothing. And then you can sleep in a hotel for $3 per night in any village once you get there. And food is pretty cheap. But I would wait until it becomes more peaceful to go to Ethiopia. I did meet a guy in Saudi Arabia, a Spanish guy, who's hitchhiked through Ethiopia recently during the Civil War. And I thought, wow, you are crazy. I thought I was crazy during a Civil War in Ethiopia. And he was hitchhiking across. I was in Saudi Arabia a year ago doing the same thing, cycling. And I said, okay, wow, okay, I'll give you a copy of this for free. You earned it. So I gave him a free copy of the book. I just had a few on me. So that was pretty funny. Sure. Yeah, good question. Good. More questions? What other
How
questions?
did the food compare to Ethiopia and the U.S.?
Yeah, very good. Well, the price was certainly a lot better in Ethiopia. A nice plate of injera and stews there costs maybe about 50 cents. And the people there, they eat every Monday and Wednesday, they eat a vegetarian diet because they think it cleanses them for their sins. And I also don't eat meat, so it was pretty nice to have that option there. Always a vegetarian option on hand in Ethiopia. But the food was just fantastic there. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, try the real thing once Ethiopia becomes peaceful. I highly recommend it. Yeah, good. More questions? Okay, in the back, yes.
What is a war that's been going on in Sudan for the past year, but what is the current war in Ethiopia about? Let's start with that.
Oh yeah, sure. So that's a good question. So it started around COVID time. So the prime minister of Ethiopia, there were supposed to be elections about a year after COVID started in Ethiopia, but the prime minister postponed the elections and said, okay, we're not going to have elections because of COVID. But then there's this group in the Tigray province called the TPLF, Tigray People's Liberation Front, that said, okay, we're going to have elections anyway. We don't care about what you have to say. We're going to have our elections. So they had their elections, and then there's all these groups started arguing, and a lot of feuds and political turmoil because of that. So that's really kind of the big instigator of the civil war in Ethiopia, unfortunately. Yeah. And then I started getting emails from these friends in the books telling me about all the horrible things that were happening. So, good question. Sure. More questions? Something else? Okay. Oh, sure. In the back, yes.
Before the war started, was there at any point during your journey where you felt you weren't safe, or weren't safe because you were a foreigner, or you had to look over your shoulder, or were there any places you were told not to go because you were a foreigner? Anything like that?
Oh yeah, sure. Sure, well, yeah, luckily in Addis Ababa, in the central part, there was a tourist information center, so I went there and asked them for advice and said, hey, here I am. My plan is to cycle in Ethiopia. I was thinking of going north to the northern part, to the Tigray province, where all of that started, this kind of civil war where the groups started fighting each other. And they said, and at the tourist information center, they said, okay, yeah, sure, you can go up there, sure, no problem. North is fine now. You should be pretty safe as a foreigner there. So yeah, I try to get local advice if I'm in a country where it can be volatile politically. So that's a good tip. Just get there and ask local people, you know, what the present situation is. So yeah, good question. Okay. All right, so if you want to keep in touch with me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There are videos that go along with this book too, several YouTube videos. And on the Intrepid Global Citizen podcast, I have a recorded conversation with the character Tetsuya, who's cycling from Cape Town to Cairo. And we talk about our reflections, and we talk more about his experience too. So you can check out the Intrepid Global Citizen podcast when you have time. So, all right. So we can finish here. Thank you so much for coming. I have some paperbacks here. I'm happy to personalize for you too. $20 each. And if you want, I have electronic ebook and an audio book also available on Kindle and through Audible or Spotify. So thank you for everybody for coming. Thank you. Oh, sure. Yeah. Sure. Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. What? Who can I make it out to? Okay.
Hey, Brian.
Oh.
While he was talking, I thought, I wonder if it would be good to get for Vaughn.
Sure, thank you.
You know, for his birthday. We're thinking of a birthday present. Okay. Do you think Vaughn?
Yeah, all right.
You know, they were good friends.
I'm exhausted after you do that.
Yeah, I know, but as a,
Oh,
you know,
good.
for $20.
Been a world traveler, that's for sure.
You could even hand
I imagine you're on pins and needles while he's gone.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a.
Well,
I was
yeah, my
Trail
too.
so more than I do. Oh,
you
with
know,
Brian and the family were first going to
I'm the last
oh my
guy.
God, what did you do?
So once you read it,
Yeah.
I always love to hear it.
Yeah, turned out to be pretty
Oh,
safe.
that too.
So yeah, keep in touch.
Well, to see your stand. Yeah. Like he's.
Yeah, thank you.
Makes
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, sure, of course.
Well, I can whichever first.
Yeah,
There you go. Thank you so much.
So can I make it out to?
Brett.